According to law enforcement, Donald Trump's own social media habits may have endangered the life of Barack Obama. Intrigued? Then click that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and enjoy the video. All right, folks, it's not like we needed additional evidence of Donald Trump's derangement or the derangement of the authoritarian cult which used to be known as the Republican Party, and yet they continue to provide it. So this is a New York Post article. I'm going to switch it over to read-only mode because this damn header keeps following me every time I scroll down. But the long and short of it is this. Last week, because of Donald Trump, a Trump-loving MAGA supporter, a guy who was there on January 6th to try to insurrect Donald Trump's way into a second unelected term. Well, that man was arrested outside the Washington, D.C. home of former Democratic President Barack Obama, the guy who Donald Trump probably hates above all else in this world, after Donald Trump on Truth Social, his social media platform, screenshot and shared an article sharing the alleged address of Barack Obama. Now, the New York Post dives into this, and again, as a reminder, the New York Post is not the New York Times. It's basically the right-leaning antithesis of the New York Times. It's a more of a conservative publication, and this is how they report it. The accused Capitol rioter, busted with a terrifying arsenal of weapons near Barack Obama's home, got the address after it was shared online by the ex-president's successor, Donald Trump, according to a court filing. Federal prosecutors highlighted the apparent link Wednesday while pushing for the homeless suspect, Taylor Taranto, 37, to be held in custody until trial. On June 29, 2023, Donald Trump posted what he claimed was the address of former President Barack Obama on the social media platform Truth Social. It did not elaborate on the post, and we'll show a screenshot here in a second because it's in the article. But Taranto, again, the person who was the armed suspect who was arrested outside of President Obama's home, used his own Truth Social account to repost the address. On Telegram, Taranto then stated, "We got these losers surrounded, see you in hell," while name-dropping the Obamas as well as former advisor John Podesta. Now, I'll point out, loser is an ironic term given that Barack Obama was twice elected. He was elected with the Electoral College vote and the popular vote, and then he was reelected with the Electoral College vote and the popular vote, which distinguishes him in terms of winning from Donald Trump pretty significantly. So this is the screenshot here. So this is Donald Trump on Truth Social screenshotting the article, and then it's the address itself is wisely redacted in the New York Post coverage, but Donald Trump shared this article. And then this is the guy in question. This is a guy who retruthed it and said, "Got them surrounded," quite literally. So the long and short of it was he scoped out the terrain. He scoped out the neighborhood. He was armed, heavily armed. He was in a van. He was live streaming. Secret Service was able to monitor him and then arrest him before any actual attack against the former president was made. Now, that's a good ending, right? The fact that nobody was hurt, certainly not President Obama, and the suspect is in custody. But it's pretty deranged. Number one, what Donald Trump did. Number two, what this guy did. This is a photograph of the evidence, the ammunition. Hundreds of rounds of ammunition this guy had on him. Now, obviously, first and foremost, Taranto, again, the last name of the suspect in question, he is primarily responsible for his actions. But there could be no question that he was primed by Donald Trump. As we know, the Republican Party, particularly the MAGA contingent, is basically an authoritarian cult. They are deranged. We've seen countless examples of evidence in a way that we've just never seen out of a political party before, certainly not on this scale. We're talking about millions upon millions of people. And there have been other instances and other reportings and other studies which indicate this like cultish personality. So The Hill has a really good article. It was published months ago. I think it might have even been back in 2022, in which polls show that the MAGA subset of Republican voters, so this isn't necessarily a widespread Republican issue coast to coast, but within the Republican Party, that hardcore MAGA cult, they are much more likely than others, certainly Democrats, but even other Republicans, to endorse acts of violence. So MAGA Republicans were much more likely than others, 58.2%, to endorse violence as usually or always justified to advance at least one of 17 specific political objectives. And they were more likely to endorse violence to advance 8 of those 17 objectives considered individually. Examples include, listen to this, to return Donald Trump to the presidency this year, to preserve an American way of life based on Western European traditions, and to stop illegal immigration. They were more likely than others to predict that they would be armed with a gun and to carry a gun openly. So, folks, this is not really an outlier. This is emblematic of the sociopolitical movement that we know as MAGA. This is not atypical. This is relatively normal. And now this particular instance of threatening the life of a former president, this is still relatively rare and hopefully will not become the norm itself. But the ethos behind it, the by any means necessary, the willingness to weaponize literal weapons and political rhetoric against their opponents, this is incredibly dangerous. And Donald Trump bears moral culpability for this. Now, of course, people will downplay this. People will pretend that this guy was, ideologically speaking, a lone wolf, not reflective at all of a socio-political movement. But we know that's not true. The MAGA movement is, much more likely than others, to endorse violence. This man was given the address by Donald Trump in terms of Truth Social. He retweeted that particular address. And then he shows up within a matter of days, heavily armed, against a man who, I'll remind you, more so than Hillary Clinton, more so than even President Biden, Barack Obama was the bane of Donald Trump's existence for years, and is arguably one of the reasons why Donald Trump ran for the presidency in 2016 in the first place. So anyway, this is terrifying, and this should encourage everybody on all sides of the aisle to take a serious look at how dangerous the MAGA movement has become, and I'm sure there will be additional reporting on the story as more details become available.